Okay, so our today's discussion is around uh, the advantages and disadvantages of direct and indirect data sources. This is a topic that we did yesterday. We discussed in detail as to what is meant by acquiring data through a direct data source or through an indirect data source. And I think during that discussion, we did manage to talk about the benefits and the drawbacks as well. But here in the list, we have this entire detailed list about the benefits and the drawbacks. So how it is arranged here in this table is that you will not find the advantages and the disadvantages written separately, but in a mixed way. When it comes to, say, for instance, if you look at this table, one of the columns is about direct data sources, the other one is about indirect data sources. So first have a look at direct data sources in terms of the advantages and disadvantages. So I will read a statement and you will tell me if this statement depicts an advantage of direct data source or a disadvantage of direct data source. Okay, so the first statement is the data will be relevant because what is needed has been collected. Is this an advantage of the? Okay, very good. ठीक है, so इसको हम let's write it down here as well so that in the end we can do a comparison of the advantages and the disadvantages. So this is an advantage. The next point is the original source is known and so can be trusted. This is also an advantage. It can take a long time to gather original data rather than use data that already exists. Okay, good. Disadvantage. So let's write it like this. Disadvantage. A large sample of statistical data can be difficult to collect for one-off purposes. Why is it a disadvantage? Let's have a look at the statement carefully. It says large sample of statistical data can be difficult to collect. It feels that most of you have figured out that it's a disadvantage because यहाँ पे difficult की term आ रही है. ऐसा तो नहीं? Okay, so somebody explain me the meaning. इसका मतलब क्या है? Yeah.
Basically, it says that you're collecting a large sample of data for a one-time purpose. So it's difficult to collect for that specific purpose. So one-time use. That's why.
You can look at it like that. Yes, that could be a point. But there is another point to it as well. Can anyone think of that? Yeah. Okay. I think it's similar to what he's saying. I mean, it's the same point. अच्छा देखें, I'll tell you. When it comes to gathering or collecting data through a direct data source, of course, it is a time-consuming process because you have to get to the source yourself to get the data. Say, for instance, if you talk about interviewing, which is one of the methods or tools that you use for collecting data, using a direct data source approach. So when you conduct interviews, it has to be one-to-one. That would always tend to take time. Yeah. But when it comes to acquiring data through an indirect data source, what if the data that you require for your purpose has not been collected by one organization but has been collected by multiple organizations for some purposes? That would mean that you have a very large pool of data available. I can get hold of that data from organization A, B, C, right? Because all of them have worked on something that required collection of that data. So I have a very large pool of data available that will help me analyze it in a better way and get a better perspective of the overall thing. So वो जो large एक statistical analysis होता है ना on a large set of data, that may not be possible when you use a direct data approach. The reason is that you do not have time and you cannot probably do that kind of an effort all the time. You do not have the money to spend to go out to many sources to collect the data. Indirect के case में there is a possibility that that data has been collected by more than one organizations in the past. So this is what this point generally highlights. So of course, it is a disadvantage of direct data sources. Next point, the data is likely to be up to date because it has been collected recently. Advantage, yes, very much an advantage. Bias can be eliminated by asking specific questions. Advantage. मुझे बताएं कि what impact can bias have on your research? Sorry? It can be faulty. Yes, it can be faulty in some way. Yes. हाँ. Very good, very good. I'm glad that you use this term of opinion. Is there a chair? Be careful. You can walk up to that point. Acha. So that brings us to one more thing that I think we can make part of our discussion, and that is, can anybody tell me what is the difference between a fact and an opinion? Raise your hands. Yeah. Okay, that could be one way of saying it. Yes. Hmm. An opinion. Very good. Very good. Yes. Very good. There's so many ways of saying the same thing. You see that? आप भी बता दें ताकि आपका भी पर्सपेक्टिव आ जाए. ठीक है, चलें. So the thing is कि fact is something which has been established as a standard. It has a wide scale acceptability in the same way. Hence, it's a standard, and that's how people take that thing or concept or whatever it is, maybe worldwide. Something which is established becomes a fact. Opinion is something which is based on somebody's own beliefs and likes and dislikes. Yeah. So when we talk about bias, what if the time at which the information was collected, okay, uh, there was bias in it in the sense that it was somebody's own wishes and desires and likes and dislikes. It was based on that. It was not an objective view of the thing. So if it wasn't, then of course it would affect my decision making or my analysis as well, because I'm not basing my research on standards. I'm basing my research on somebody's opinion or likes and dislikes. So with direct data sources, since you have this opportunity to go to the source yourself, you can ensure that in your questioning, you you try your best to eliminate any bias in the answers. And if at all there is any bias being exercised, you will notice it and you can deal with it. लेकिन जब किसी और ने इंफॉर्मेशन कलेक्ट की हुई है एट सम अदर टाइम which you're just using, can you with any amount of surety say that whether it was conducted with a bias or an unbiased approach? You cannot. Okay, so you just have to take it on the face of it the way it is. So direct data sources का ये एक advantage होगा कि bias can be eliminated. Last point, The data can be collected and presented in the format required. Advantage, very good. ठीक हो गया जी. Let's now have a look at the advantages and disadvantages of indirect data source. Additional data that is not required will exist that may take time to sort through, and some data that is required may not exist. Disadvantage. The original source may not be known, and so it can't be assumed that it is reliable. Disadvantage. The data is immediately available. Advantage. Don't have to go through the hassle of going up to people and collecting and recording. Yeah, that tends to take time. Here, it is there, available. You go to the company or organization that has it, pay them a certain amount of money. By the way, it is not free, you have to pay for it. You pay the amount, get the data, and start using it for your purpose or analysis. If statistical analysis is required, then there are more likely to be large samples available. It's an advantage, and it automatically becomes an advantage of indirect data compared to direct, जहाँ पे हम कह रहे थे कि large pool of statistical data हमें available नहीं होगा. All right, so this is an advantage. Data may be out of date because it was collected at a different time. Disadvantage. My stylus has stopped writing. Anyway. Okay, it's a disadvantage. Original data may be biased due to its source. Disadvantage. The data is unlikely to be in the format required, which may make extracting the data difficult. Disadvantage. All right. So, although I was not able to write it across the last 3 points, but we can still figure out, I can actually tell you that if we do a count of the advantages and disadvantages of both direct and indirect data sources, they're exactly opposite. Like, for example, there are, I think there are one, two, three, four, five advantages and two disadvantages when it comes to gathering data through indirect data, sorry, through direct data sources, and an exact opposite in case of indirect. There are two advantages and five disadvantages. Hence, we were able to figure this out even when we were discussing it earlier on without having seen the advantages and disadvantages, that gathering data through a direct data source would have more benefits because things are more in your control. All right. Okay.